Most of us were taught that kindness is always good. Be kind to others, help when you can, put people first. And on the surface, that sounds right. But here's what nobody really talks about. Kindness, like almost every human behavior, has a shadow side. And that shadow side is not just about people who fake kindness to manipulate others. That part is obvious. What is much harder to see and much more common is the way sincere, genuine kindness, the kind that comes from a real desire to help, can quietly cause damage to the person giving it, and sometimes to the person receiving it. This is not a video about why you should stop being kind. It is about understanding kindness at a deeper level, so that the way you practice it actually serves people rather than slowly harming them or you. Let us start with something most people have experienced but never named properly. You have a friend who's going through a hard time. They're struggling financially, emotionally, maybe relationally. And you step in. You lend them money, give them your time, cover for them, rearrange your schedule around their needs. You do this because you genuinely care. You're not performing kindness, you mean it. But months pass and you notice something. They're still in the same place. They call you every time something goes wrong. They haven't made any real changes. And you're exhausted, quietly resentful, and somehow feel guilty for even feeling resentful, because after all, you chose to help. This situation is incredibly common, and it's a direct consequence of what psychologists call enabling behavior. The kindness was real, the care was real, but the effect was that your help removed the pressure that would have pushed them to change. Every time a consequence was softened by your support, the lesson that consequence was supposed to teach never landed. This is one of the clearest examples of how sincere kindness can produce the opposite of what it intends. The psychological mechanism behind this is well documented. Human beings are wired to move away from discomfort and toward comfort. When discomfort is consistently removed from the equation, even with the best intentions, the motivation to find a lasting solution drops. Not because the person is lazy or manipulative, but because the brain does not have a strong enough reason to reorganize itself around a new behavior. The discomfort was the signal. The kindness, in this case, turned off the signal before it could do its work. Now, this does not mean kindness is wrong. It means the timing, the form, and the intention behind kindness all matter. A doctor who numbs your pain without diagnosing what is causing it is not being cruel. They might even feel like they are being kind. But over time, that approach makes things worse. Real kindness often requires tolerating the discomfort of watching someone struggle, because struggle is sometimes the exact process through which growth happens. This is uncomfortable to accept, especially when you care deeply about someone. There's another layer to this that runs even deeper, and it has to do with why people become excessively kind in the first place. Not all of us are raised in environments where kindness is a free, genuine expression. For many people, kindness becomes a coping strategy. It becomes the way they learn to feel safe in relationships. If you grew up in a household where love was conditional, where you received warmth when you were helpful, agreeable, or emotionally low maintenance, and received withdrawal when you had your own needs, your brain learns something very specific. It learns that being needed equals being valued, that taking care of others equals being loved, that having your own needs is risky. Psychologists refer to this as the Fawn response, one of the four stress responses alongside fight, flight, and freeze. When someone fawns, they prioritize the emotions and needs of others, often at the expense of their own, as a survival mechanism. The kindness is real, but underneath it is a fear that if they stop being useful, people will leave. People who operate from this place tend to attract a very specific dynamic in their relationships. Because they have difficulty saying no, they often end up in relationships with people who have difficulty hearing no. Because they suppress their own needs, they often find themselves overgiving to people who have learned to overtake. This is not a moral judgment on either person. It is a pattern, and it repeats because neither person is dealing with the root issue. The overgiver is not dealing with their belief that their needs do not matter. The overtaker is not dealing with their own avoidance of self-sufficiency. Both are using the relationship to maintain a comfortable but ultimately limiting status quo. There's a concept in psychology called codependency, and it is directly connected to this. Codependency is when one person's sense of identity, self-worth, or emotional stability becomes wrapped up in the role of caretaker. The relationship functions on an imbalance. One person gives, the other takes, and both parties become dependent on maintaining that imbalance because it fulfills something in each of them. The giver feels purposeful and needed. The taker feels supported and relieved of responsibility. But neither person is actually growing, and neither is actually in a genuinely mutual relationship, which is the only kind that produces long-term psychological well-being. One of the most painful realizations for chronic givers is when they finally recognize that some people in their lives have not actually connected with them as a person. They have connected with them as a function, as a resource. When a chronic giver finally sets a boundary, says no for the first time, or stops absorbing someone else's problems, they often find that the relationship either shifts significantly or disappears entirely. And that experience is devastating because it confirms the fear they were trying to outrun, that without being useful, they are not valued. But here is the important reframe. The fact that the relationship ended when you set a boundary does not prove that you are not lovable. It proves that the relationship was built on a transaction, not on genuine connection. And losing a transactional relationship is not the same as losing love. It is the beginning of making room for it. Let us also talk about what excessive kindness does to the person practicing it over time. There is research in occupational psychology on what is called compassion fatigue, which was originally studied in nurses, therapists, and emergency workers, people whose professional role requires sustained emotional giving. What they found is that prolonged emotional output without adequate recovery, recognition, or reciprocity leads to a kind of emotional exhaustion that goes beyond tiredness. It affects the ability to feel empathy at all. People who once cared deeply begin to feel numb. They become irritable, detached, sometimes cynical. They start going through the motions of helping without actually feeling it. This is not a character failure. It is a nervous system response to depletion. And it doesn't only happen to professionals. It happens to parents, partners, friends, and colleagues who have spent years giving more than they receive, telling themselves that needing anything in return makes them selfish. The word selfish is worth examining here because it is often used as a weapon against people who begin to reclaim their own well-being. There is a significant difference between selfishness and self-respect. Selfishness is the disregard of others for your own benefit. Self-respect is the recognition that your own needs are legitimate and that you cannot sustainably give from an empty place. When someone sets a limit on how much they are willing to absorb, they are not abandoning others. They are maintaining the conditions that make genuine care possible. The psychological research on this is consistent. People who have a stable sense of their own value and who maintain boundaries in relationships are more capable of authentic empathy, not less. They give because they want to, not because they are afraid of what happens if they don't. That is a fundamentally different psychological state, and it produces fundamentally different outcomes. There is also a social and relational cost to unkind kindness that often goes unexamined, and that is what it does to the person receiving it. When someone is consistently rescued from difficulty, they are implicitly being told something about themselves. They are being told that the person helping them does not believe they are capable of handling their own problems. Even when this is never said out loud, people feel it. It comes through in the urgency with which someone steps in the way help is offered before it is asked for, in the subtle anxiety that shows up when the helper thinks the other person is about to struggle. Over time, the person on the receiving end can begin to internalize a belief that they are not capable, that they need help, that independence is not really available to them. This is particularly visible in parenting, where well-meaning parents who overprotect and oversolve inadvertently raise children who are more anxious, less resilient, and less confident in their own ability to navigate difficulty. The intention was love, the outcome was limitation. Psychologists who work with family systems talk about a concept called differentiation, the degree to which a person is able to maintain their own sense of self while remaining emotionally connected to others. People with high differentiation can be close, caring, and engaged without losing themselves in the process. They can tolerate watching someone they love struggle without immediately moving to fix it. They can offer support while also respecting the other person's ability to find their own way. People with low differentiation, by contrast, experience other people's emotions as their own. When someone they love is in pain, they cannot rest until they have done something to relieve it. This is often mistaken for deep care, and the emotion driving it is real, but the behavior it produces is often about managing their own anxiety, not genuinely serving the other person. Understanding this distinction is not about becoming cold or withholding. It is about developing a more mature and effective form of care. The most genuinely helpful people are usually not the ones who give the most. They are the ones who give in ways that actually serve the other person's growth and autonomy, who can sit with someone in their difficulty without trying to erase it, who can offer perspective without imposing it, who know the difference between what someone wants in the moment and what they actually need. So, where does this leave us? The psychology of the dark side of kindness is not really about kindness being bad. It is about the fact that how we practice kindness reflects and shapes our deeper psychology, our relationship to ourselves, our fears, our beliefs about what makes us worthy of love. When kindness comes from wholeness, it tends to produce good outcomes. When it comes from fear or unprocessed need or a desperate attempt to control what others feel about us, it produces something that looks like kindness from the outside but functions differently in practice. The work, then, is not to become less kind. It is to become honest about where your kindness is coming from. To ask yourself regularly whether the help you are offering is something the other person actually needs or something you need to give. To notice whether your care for others is accompanied by care for yourself, or whether you have been using the former to justify ignoring the latter. And to understand that the people who love you most are not the ones who have benefited most from your giving. They are the ones who would stay even if you had nothing left to give. That distinction is worth knowing because it changes everything about how you show up in your relationships and ultimately how you feel about yourself.